Breaking news we're following this morning. It comes out of the state capitol because it looks like we have a budget. Lawmakers, they worked through the night to finish work on that $66 billion budget and, more importantly, avoid a state government shutdown.
Now, that's the good news for the state and the 33,000 workers that could have been put on notice. Didn't come without controversy, though. The biggest point of contention here, stripping health care from adult undocumented immigrants. Our Barrett Leone is live at the state capitol this morning with more on that race to get that deal done, Barrett.
I think I just dropped. Can you cue me? Yeah, this was certainly a legislative session to remember. You know, lawmakers spent a lot of time overnight working through the hours, but a government shutdown was averted, like you mentioned. So lawmakers began their work in this special session 10 o'clock yesterday. The Senate adjourned before midnight. The House worked into the early morning hours. 2 o'clock is when they wrapped up shop. Now, they approved 14 bills in that time, many of them piecing together the roughly $66 billion budget plan. They also signed off on a controversial proposal to remove undocumented immigrants from Minnesota Care, providing health care coverage to low-income Minnesotans. Debate in the House chamber lasted 4 hours on that issue alone. Other than that, it was smooth sailing for the remaining bills. It capped off a unique session with a tied House, only the second time in history.
And I think in the end, fighting for that equal shared power made this a better session. And I think the way that today unfolded was about cooperation and collaboration. We could have had that from the word go. I'm really happy that we did finally get there.
We needed to make Minnesota an affordable place that people could afford their lives. We wanted to reduce mandates. Did we get everything done that we wanted to? No, we didn't, but we made a lot of great strides.
So leaders admit that they may return for another special session if Medicaid cuts at the federal level are steep. So they did admit that they might not be done just yet. And we mentioned that controversial piece of legislation, the rollback on undocumented immigrant adults from Minnesota Care. That was at times an emotional and contentious debate, especially in the House chamber. We're going to break down that debate coming up in about 30 minutes.
Our Barrett Leone at the state capitol with the breakdown. Barrett, thank you. Now, we also want to note this marked the end of what's been a very, very volatile session.
Started back January 14th with a stalemate in the House. Yet a power sharing agreement that was reached on February 3rd. But lawmakers were weeks behind schedule. Republican Lisa Demuth, who you just heard from, she was elected speaker and made her the first black woman to serve in the role. Session also saw a few special elections. Those took place in both Roseville and Shakopee, as well as Senator Justin Eichhorn resigning in a connection with a sexting operation. So then fast forward to May 19th. That is when the session officially ended without a budget agreement. Lawmakers continue to hold behind-the-scenes work sessions to come to terms. And that brings us to yesterday when that special session convened.
Lawmakers went into overtime, but they did get the job done.
Overnight, the Minnesota Legislature finished that budget in a special session. It lasted less than a day. Barrett Leone is live from the state capitol this morning, and this budget complete now. But it certainly wasn't a cut and dry process, was it, Barrett?
No, and remember, this was a historically closely divided Capitol, and we know that some of these proposals were a bit contentious. One of them was part of a key compromise in passing that $66 billion state budget, and that was the piece of legislation that would remove undocumented immigrant adults from a state health care program. So this measure makes undocumented adults no longer eligible for Minnesota Care by the end of this year. This change was a major sticking point during negotiations between Democrats and Republicans. Repealing the law was a top priority for GOP lawmakers who were concerned about growing enrollment, adding to state costs. But the bill sparked fierce pushback and emotional testimony from DFL lawmakers who say this change is cruel and will cause irreparable harm. Former DFL Speaker Melissa Hortman was the sole Democrat to vote for it in the tied House chamber, despite her personal opposition.
I'll continue to have health insurance, so I'm fine. What I worry about is the people who will lose their health insurance. I know that people will be hurt by that vote, and we worked very hard to try to get a budget deal that wouldn't include that provision. And we tried any other way we could to come to a budget agreement with Republicans. and they wouldn't have it. So, I did what leaders do. I stepped up and I got the job done for the people of Minnesota.
We know that this was a priority that we had, but we looked at the entire budget overall. From the time we started working the beginning of the session and started meeting with the governor, there was a push to increase revenue. Republicans, being in a tie, were able to accomplish much more, not as much as we wanted, but much more in making Minnesota affordable. We are not uncaring. We are looking out for the best interest of Minnesotans and being responsible with taxpayer dollars.
So right now, this measure is on its way to the governor's desk, and he is expected to sign it. However, there is a provision in another proposal that would withhold funding for health care, for the health department, rather, if the governor does not sign this bill.